Now, clearly the PhD or the DPhil supervisor is crucially important to the success of your doctorate, although perhaps less so now than in the past, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But in my experience of having a responsibility for doctoral students over the past 15 years, the relationship with a supervisor is also one of the issues that has proved to be most challenging and has given rise to most anxiety and concern. And this is one of the reasons for my leading sessions such as this one today. We could call it working with your supervisor, and that would also be accurate. But sometimes I prefer the title managing your supervisor, since it's also a management task for you. And one of my goals is to try to empower doctoral students, insofar as this is possible, to discuss expectations, rights, responsibilities, and to try to help you to negotiate a productive and fruitful relationship. In a way, what I'm saying is to suggest that you play an active rather than a passive role in your relationship with your supervisor, and that, I hope, will help you to make a fruitful and productive relationship. As I'll discuss later, the relationship is two-way. You play your part, and your supervisor plays theirs. I went round briefly before and discovered that quite a lot of you are first years. Is that right? Can you put up your hands if you're first years? Second years? Third years? Fourth years? Anyone else? Great. It's never too late to manage the relationship with your supervisor. But for people who are in their first year, and in my own department I will usually do a session like this in week 2, it's very, very important that you work on that relationship right from the start. For people in their second, third and fourth, it's never too late to look at that relationship. If it's got any room for improvement, never too late to look at that. So first of all, the relationship. I've put just there 3 quotes. The relationship is so crucial that students cannot afford to leave it to chance. A good relationship between student and supervisor needs work by both parties. It isn't your supervisor's responsibility to make everything all right. It's up to both of you to work together. And a good relationship is one that is developed actively, and this requires determination, commitment and patience. It takes time and effort to build strong relationships. So my first message is it's a relationship like any other relationships, and it needs work. However, the relationship between student and supervisor is a relationship both like and unlike any other. Like other relationships, it needs work, negotiation, openness, communication, trust, honesty and information. And really, I think I would want to emphasize communication, trust and honesty. It's really important that you can find a way of establishing that with your supervisor. We're all human, supervisors. I'm human, you're human. So we all know about the ways of developing relationships. However, importantly, it's unlike many other relationships, since it has an intrinsic power imbalance, which may affect that it works the way that it works and develops. So we can't pretend that we're all equal, that we all have the same status, that we all have the same role that we have in other relationships, particularly with our friends. There is this power imbalance. And it's this power imbalance, I think, which makes it quite a complicated relationship, or potentially complicated relationship, because ultimately the supervisor has many roles. He or she is your teacher, but ultimately he or she also is involved in assessment, not in the final examination, but in the assessment and evaluation of your progress. But I would like also to suggest that this relationship can be hugely rewarding and mutually beneficial, and you have a really important part to play in making it so. So it's worth taking time. Think about that relationship, whether you're at the start of your MPhil, DPhil, or whether it's later on. And obviously, your relationship will be affected by all sorts of things, by your personality and that of your supervisor, preferences, habits, goals, culture, huge cultural differences in the way that supervisors and students relate to each other. Worth thinking about that, possibly even talking about that. Gender, expectations, previous experiences, your previous experiences of teaching, learning, maybe being supervised, certainly your supervisor's previous experiences of doing the PhD. They will all make a difference. And the context of the supervisory situation. One very strong difference in the supervisory situation, of course, is whether we're working in the lab or in the library. So science-based subjects have a very, very different supervisory culture, supervisory practices than, say, arts-based subjects, where a lot of the work is one-to-one and study done in the library. If you think about your supervisor, there are various metaphors that you could use. And in some of my work with students, I've got students to discuss these metaphors and think which one most matches the way that they think about their relationship with their supervisor. The point I'd like to make here is that there are many different roles that your supervisor plays, many different roles that you play, and also that these change over time. So that you could start off with teacher-pupil, expert-novice, mentor-apprentice, and then by the end of the DPhil, you could very well be senior colleague, junior colleague, or even colleague-colleague. It's worth thinking about these important questions. These are very useful at the start of your MPhil, DPhil, but again, never too late to think about them. Remember, this is one of the most precious and valuable times of your life. You're investing considerable time, 2, 3, 4 years. You're also investing considerable resources, maybe even your personal funds, but you're certainly investing time and resources. This is a really, really precious time of your life, and you need to make sure that it works for you. So you don't have the time to waste with an unproductive relationship with your supervisor. So think about, what do you expect from your supervisor, and what does he or she expect from you? What role do you expect her to play? How will you get the best out of your supervisor, and how will the supervisor get the best out of you? What can you do to make sure the relationship works well? What kind of student are you, and what kind of a scholar or teacher is your supervisor? It's really worth thinking about those kinds of questions. Ask them yourself privately, share them with your colleagues, perhaps ask them with your supervisor.